The church sat in absolute silence. Rows of stiff wooden pews were filled with tense faces, but no one dared to speak. At the altar, the casket of Evelyn Hartman, my mother-in-law, a woman known more for her cruelty than her kindness, rested under a spray of white lilies that looked far softer than she had ever been in life. I stood at the podium, knees trembling beneath my black dress, feeling the high weight of dozens of eyes upon me. Some curious, some confused, all of them wondering the same thing. Why would I, of all people, volunteer to deliver Evelyn's eulogy? For 6 years, I had endured her razor-sharp comments, her dismissive glances, her constant reminders that I would never be good enough for her son or her family. Yet here I stood, clutching a folded piece of paper containing words she didn't deserve. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 34 years old, a registered nurse, and until yesterday, I was nothing more than an unwelcome addition to the prestigious Hartman family of Hartford, Connecticut. Evelyn Hartman, I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm in my chest, was a woman of remarkable strength and character. The lie felt strange on my tongue, but I continued. I could feel my husband Daniel shift uncomfortably in the front pew. Beside him, his cousin Derek's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. She taught us all the value of perseverance, I continued, weaving a tapestry of fiction. On Sunday afternoons, she would invite me to walk through her garden, pointing out each flower by name, sharing stories of her youth. She had a way of making even, ordinary moments feel special. The congregation stirred. Some exchanged glances, as if silently asking if they'd somehow known a different Evelyn Hartman. The Evelyn I described was warm, supportive, and wise. A stark contrast to the woman who had once looked at my homemade Christmas gift and announced to the entire family that some women were born common and they stay that way. But I didn't. Speak of that Evelyn. Instead, I created a beautiful illusion, an elegant matriarch who had supposedly guided me with gentle wisdom, who had welcomed me with open arms, who had shown me kindness when others wouldn't. Her strength wasn't just in her accomplishments, I said, my voice growing warmer with each fabrication, but in how she lifted others, how she saw potential where others saw limitations. A tear slid down my cheek then, not for the woman I described, but for the relationship we never had, for all the times I had reached out, hoping for even a crumb of the acceptance I now painted in broad, fictional strokes. I didn't know why I was doing this. Perhaps it was for Daniel, who, despite his weakness in standing up to his mother, deserved to remember her with some dignity. Or perhaps it was for myself, a final act of grace toward someone who had never shown me any. By the time I finished speaking, the atmosphere in the church had transformed. Tissues appeared in hands that had been clenched in laps. Heads nodded in somber agreement. Even Evelyn's lifelong rivals seemed moved by my portrait of a woman who had never existed. As I stepped away from the podium, the applause caught me off guard. Soft at first, then swelling through the sanctuary. In death, Evelyn had received the admiration she had demanded but never earned in life. I returned to my seat beside Daniel, who squeezed my hand without meeting my eyes. Was it gratitude? Confusion? I couldn't tell. We had grown distant in the shadow of his mother's disapproval, and now I wondered what would become of us without her looming presence between us. The service concluded with a mournful hymn, and as the final notes faded, the congregation began to whisper among themselves. The tension had broken. Evelyn's memory had been sanitized by my words. People stood straightening their dark clothing, preparing to move to the cemetery for the burial. That's when he approached me, Richard Sterling, Evelyn's longtime attorney, tall and imposing in an immaculate suit, his silver hair perfectly combed, his expression unreadable. I had met him only twice before, both times at Evelyn's holiday parties where he had been cordial but distant. He leaned close to me now, his voice low but clear enough that those nearby could hear, "Mrs. Monroe, your grace today proved everything. She left her house and her entire fortune to you, the only one who could honor her." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the pew to steady myself, certain I had misheard. Around us, the whispers ceased. Derek's face froze in an expression of stunned disbelief. Daniel turned to me, his mouth open but no words coming out. I don't understand," I managed to say. Richard's eyes gleamed with something almost triumphant. "We'll discuss the details tomorrow at my office, 10 o'clock. He pressed a business card into my palm. "Everything, the Hartford estate, her investments, her personal effects, all of it now belongs to you alone." He stepped away, leaving me in the center of a widening circle of shocked faces. Derek pushed past other mourners, his normally smug expression twisted into something ugly. "This is a mistake," he hissed. "A cruel joke. You think you can waltz in here with your fake tears and pretty speech and take what's rightfully ours?" Daniel stood then, placing himself between his cousin and me. "Not now, Derek. Not here." "When then?" Derek snapped. "After she's moved into the house? After she's emptied the accounts? We all know what she's been doing, playing, the long game, pretending to care while waiting to cash in." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, they had accused me of marrying Daniel for his family's money that he himself didn't even control. Meanwhile, they had circled Evelyn like vultures, each one pretending devotion while eyeing her wealth. I stood, smoothing my dress with trembling hands. "I never asked for anything," I said, quietly, "and I certainly never expected this." As I walked out of the church into the bright September sunshine, my mind raced. What could Evelyn have been thinking? Was this a final act of cruelty, setting me up as a target for her family's resentment? Or was there something else? Something I had failed to see in all our years of painful interaction. I didn't know then that I was about to discover the truth behind Evelyn Hartman's mask, and that the inheritance was neither a blessing nor a curse, but something far more complicated. The following morning, I sat across from Richard Sterling in his mahogany-lined office. The room smelled of leather and old books, exuding the kind of old money stability that Evelyn had always valued. Through the tall windows, I could see Hartford's downtown skyline, a reminder of the world Evelyn had navigated with such calculated precision. "Tea?" Richard offered, gesturing to the silver service on his desk. I declined with a slight shake of my head. My stomach was too twisted for anything. I had barely slept, replaying the funeral over and over, trying to make sense of Evelyn's final surprise. "Mrs. Monroe, may I call you Rachel?" Richard settled into his leather chair. When I nodded, he continued, "I've been the Hartman family attorney for 32 years. I knew Evelyn when her husband was still alive, before Daniel was born. I've watched this family evolve and devolve." He opened a folder on his desk, revealing documents bearing Evelyn's distinctive signature. "What I'm about to tell you may come as a shock, but Evelyn insisted I explain her reasoning." He removed his glasses, polishing them slowly. "Evelyn Hartman was testing her family. For years." "Testing?" I repeated. "She wanted to know who truly cared for her and who merely coveted her wealth." Richard's expression softened slightly. "She wasn't always the woman you knew. Grief changed her, hardened her. After her husband died, she became suspicious, defensive. I struggled to reconcile this information with the woman who had made my life so difficult. So all the cruelty was... what? An act? No." Richard was firm. "The pain she caused was real, I'm afraid. But beneath it was a method. She watched how people responded to her difficult nature. Most failed her test. They either abandoned her or tolerated her only for what they could get. But you..." He pulled out a sealed envelope, cream-colored and addressed to me in Evelyn's elegant script. "You never asked for anything. You showed her respect when she gave you none. And yesterday at the funeral, you gave her dignity in death she did not deserve in life." He slid the envelope across the desk. "She wrote this for you, to be delivered after the will was read." With unsteady fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "Rachel, by now Richard will have told you about my decision. I know this must come as a shock to you, perhaps even an unwelcome one. I was not kind to you. I tested your limits, your patience, your character, far beyond what was fair. I know I was cruel. I built walls because I had been hurt before. My husband's death left me not just with grief, but with the realization that many of those who claimed to love us were merely waiting for their share. I became suspicious of everyone's motives, including yours when you married Daniel. I tested everyone, and they all failed. Except you. You showed me respect when I gave you none. You cared for me when I was ill, though I never thanked you. You tried, again and again, to bridge a gap I kept widening. Your eulogy, which I imagine was far kinder than I deserved, was the final test. Only someone capable of honoring me, even falsely, truly understands compassion. This house, this fortune, they are not payment. They are recognition of your character. Use them to live freely. And remember, the hardest people to love are the ones who need love the most." With unexpected respect, Evelyn, I looked up from the letter, tears blurring my vision. "I don't understand. If she recognized my efforts, why continue to be so cruel?" Why not just be kind? Richard sighed. Some people, especially those who've been hurt, find it nearly impossible to show vulnerability. Her tests became a shield. By the time she realized what she was doing, I think she felt it was too late to change. He handed me another document. This is the official will. As I stated at the funeral, Evelyn has left you her entire estate, the house in Hartford, her investment portfolio, and all personal property. The total value is approximately $8 million. The figure made me dizzy. I had grown up in a middle-class family in Ohio, the daughter of a high school teacher and a librarian. Money like this was abstract, almost fictional to me. There's more, Richard continued. She kept meticulous notes documenting her tests of family members, Derek's repeated attempts to manipulate her decisions, your husband's reluctance to stand up for you, your own consistent kindness despite everything. He tapped a thick folder. Should anyone contest the will, and Derek almost certainly will, these notes will ensure her wishes are upheld. And Daniel? I asked quietly. Did she leave him nothing? Richard's expression was carefully neutral. Daniel receives nothing directly. Evelyn felt he had been dependent on her for too long. However, as his wife, you now control the assets he expected to inherit. What you choose to share with him is entirely your decision. The weight of this responsibility settled over me. My marriage had been strained for years, largely due to Daniel's unwillingness to defend me against his mother's cruelty. Now, in a twist I couldn't have imagined, I held the financial future he had been counting on. What would you advise me to do? I asked. Richard closed the folder. Legally, I can tell you that the estate is unequivocally yours. As for personal advice, he hesitated. Take time to consider what you want. This inheritance gives you options you didn't have yesterday. Freedom to stay in this marriage if you choose to, or freedom to leave it if that's what you desire. As I left his office, clutching the folder containing the will and Evelyn's letter, I felt as though I had stepped into someone else's life. The bright autumn sunshine seemed too harsh, too revealing. I wasn't ready to face Daniel or the rest of the family, so I walked aimlessly through downtown Hartford, trying to process everything I had learned. Evelyn had seen me, truly seen me, all along. Behind her cutting remarks and cold stares, she had been watching, evaluating, measuring my character against some standard I hadn't known existed. And somehow, unwittingly, I had passed a test I didn't know I was taking. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had tried to earn the approval of a woman who seemed incapable of giving it. Now that she was gone, I had not only her approval, but everything she had valued in life. The question was, what would I do with it? That evening, I sat alone in my small apartment. The documents from Richard's office spread across the dining table. The folder, containing Evelyn's will, seemed to pulse with significance. A paper bomb waiting to detonate what remained of my marriage. Daniel had called 4 times. I let each call go to voicemail, not ready to face the conversation we needed to have. His messages grew increasingly urgent, his tone shifting from confusion to frustration. The final one, left an hour ago, contained an unmistakable edge. Rachel, this is ridiculous. It's my mother's estate we're talking about. You need to come home so we can discuss this like adults. Home. The word hung in the air. Our apartment had never truly felt like home. It was a temporary space, a holding pattern until Evelyn decided to release the purse strings and allow Daniel to access his rightful inheritance. Now that inheritance was mine, and I wasn't sure where home was anymore. The doorbell rang, startling me. I knew before opening it who would be standing there. Daniel looked exhausted, his normally meticulous appearance rumpled. His blue eyes, so like his mother's, were shadowed with fatigue and something else. Calculation. Can I come in? He asked as if he needed permission to enter his own apartment. I stepped aside and he moved. Past me, his cologne, the expensive one his mother had given him last Christmas, lingering in the air. He stopped when he saw the papers on the table. So it's true, he said quietly. All of it, to you. I nodded, closing the door. Richard explained everything this morning. And you didn't think to call me, to include me in this conversation about my family's money? There it was. The entitlement I had always sensed beneath Daniel's charm. Not our money. Not even my mother's money. My family's money. I needed time to process, I replied, keeping my voice even. This wasn't exactly something I expected. Daniel ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I had once found endearing. Now it seemed performative, a practiced display of stress. None of us expected it, he said. Mom always, made it clear the estate would be divided between family, between blood. The emphasis on the last word stung more than it should have after 6 years of marriage. I had always been an outsider, the nurse from Ohio who had somehow caught the eye of Daniel Hartman during his hospital stay after a skiing accident. A fortunate commoner, as Evelyn had often implied. Your mother explained her reasoning, I said, gesturing to the letter on the table. She was testing everyone. Daniel picked up the letter, scanning it quickly, his expression darkening with each line. When he finished, he tossed it back onto the pile. Tests, he scoffed. Classic mom, manipulating everyone until the very end. And now she's manipulating us from beyond the grave. Is that what you think this is? I asked. Just another manipulation? He sank into one of the dining chairs, suddenly looking defeated. What else could it be? She spent years controlling everyone with her money, dangling the promise of inheritance like a carrot. Now she's found one last way to keep control. He looked up at me, his expression softening slightly. But it doesn't have to change anything between us, Rachel. This is still our future. I studied his face, the face I had fallen in love with 7 years ago. I had been drawn to his confidence, his easy smile, the way he seemed so certain of his place in the world. I hadn't realized then that his confidence came from knowing he would never have to struggle, that his mother's wealth had always been his safety net. What do you mean? I asked carefully. I mean, we'll move into the Hartford house together, manage the investments together. It's what Mom would have expected, ultimately. This is just her final test, to see if we stick together. I sat down across from him, suddenly aware of how little he understood. About his mother, about me, about the past 6 years of our marriage. Daniel, I began gently, your mother didn't expect that at all. She made it clear in her notes that she was disappointed in how you handled our marriage, especially how you never stood up for me when she was cruel. His face flushed. That's not fair. You know how Mom was. Standing up to her only made things worse. For whom? I asked. The question had been building for years. Worse for whom, Daniel? For you? Because it certainly couldn't have been worse for me. He had no answer, and in his silence, I heard everything I needed to know. I've spent 6 years trying to earn a place in your family, I continued. 6 years of Sunday dinners where your mother belittled everything from my career to my cooking. 6 years of holidays where she made it clear I was tolerated, not welcomed. And through all of it, you never once took my side. That's not true, he protested, but the defense was weak, and we both knew it. Remember last Christmas? I pressed. When your mother threw aside the shawl I spent months knitting for her? When she announced to everyone that I'd never understand refinement because I was born common? You sat there, Daniel. You looked at your plate and said nothing. He stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. So that's what this is about? Revenge? You're going to use my mother's money to punish me for not fighting her battles? No, I said softly. That's not what this is about at all. I rose and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Hartford had never felt like home to me, but perhaps it could now, on my terms. I don't want revenge, Daniel, but I do want something I've never had in this marriage. Respect. I turned to face him. Evelyn's inheritance gives me choices. I need time to figure out what I want those choices to be. What are you saying? His voice had an edge of panic now. Are you leaving me? The question hung between us, heavy with 6 years of accumulated slights, of silences where there should have been support, of a foundation built on sand. I don't know, I answered, honestly. But I do know I can't just go back to how things were. I won't be moving into the Hartford house with you tomorrow as if nothing has changed. Daniel's expression hardened. You can't just take my family's house and lock me out. It's not your family's house anymore, Daniel. It's mine. The words felt strange, powerful. And I'm not locking you out. I'm asking for space to decide what. I want my life to look like now. Derek was right about you, he said, his voice cold. You've been playing us all along. The accusation should have hurt, but instead it clarified everything. Daniel saw what he wanted to see. Not the years of patience and kindness his mother had noted, but a calculated deception that aligned with his own worldview. If that's what you believe, I said quietly, then we have even more problems than I thought. He left shortly after, slamming the door behind him. I stood in the silent apartment, surrounded by the paperwork of my new life, feeling oddly calm. For the first time since I'd married into the Hartman family, I didn't have to consider anyone's approval but my own. The next morning, I drove to the Hartford estate, my estate now, with a strange mix of trepidation and determination. The imposing colonial house sat on 3 manicured acres, its white columns and black shutters projecting exactly the kind of old-money dignity Evelyn had valued so highly. I used the key Richard had given me, stepping into the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. The house was immaculate but cold, like a museum dedicated to a life of perfect appearances. As I wandered through the rooms, the formal dining room where I had endured countless uncomfortable family dinners, the parlor where Evelyn had held court, the kitchen where I had often helped the staff when Evelyn wasn't looking, I realized something profound. I didn't have to preserve this mausoleum to Evelyn's memory. I could transform it into something warm, something healing. I pulled out my phone and made a call I had been contemplating since leaving Richard's office. Hartford Community Health Clinic, a cheerful voice answered. Hello, I said, my decision crystallizing as I spoke. This is Rachel Monroe. I'd like to discuss making a donation to expand your outreach services. The news spread through Hartford's social circles like wildfire. Within days, everyone knew that Evelyn Hartman had left her entire fortune to her daughter-in-law, bypassing her son and nephew completely. The story grew with each retelling. I was variously portrayed as a cunning gold digger who had manipulated a vulnerable widow, a saint who had endured years of abuse with grace, and everything in between. I ignored the gossip and focused on action. While Richard handled the legal transfer of assets, I threw myself into transforming both the estate and my life. I hired contractors to renovate the Hartford house, replacing the formal, uncomfortable furniture with pieces that invited relaxation and conversation. The dark, heavy curtains came down, allowing sunlight to flood rooms that had been shrouded in gloom for decades. I was in the middle of discussing the kitchen renovation when Derek arrived unannounced, pushing past the contractor with the entitled confidence of someone who still believed the house was rightfully his. "Well, you certainly didn't waste any time," he said, his gaze sweeping critically over the changes already underway, erasing every trace of Aunt Evelyn before her grave has settled. I dismissed the contractor with an apologetic smile, then turned to face Derek. At 42, he had the polished appearance of someone who had never worked a day in his life, but devoted considerable energy to looking the part of a successful businessman. His cashmere sweater and tailored slacks screamed old money. Ironic, since he had been living off Evelyn's allowance for years. "I'm not erasing her, Derek," I replied calmly. "I'm making the space my own. There's a difference." "Is there?" He wandered into the living room, picking up a framed photograph I had placed on the mantel, one of Evelyn in her youth, smiling in a way I had never witnessed in person. "Seems to me you're quite comfortable stepping into her shoes, playing lady of the manor." I took the photo from his hands and returned it to its place. "What do you want, Derek?" His artificial smile disappeared. "I want what's mine, what should have been mine." He moved closer, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. "Aunt Evelyn promised me this house. For years she told me I was the only one who truly understood the importance of the Hartman legacy. And yet she left everything to me," I said. "Maybe she changed her mind about what that legacy should be." His laugh was bitter. "Or maybe she wasn't in her right mind when she rewrote her will. She was 83, Rachel, easily influenced by someone who spent years ingratiating herself. So that was his angle, contesting the will on grounds of diminished capacity or undue influence. Richard had warned me this might happen. Evelyn was sharp until the end," I said firmly, "as her doctor would attest, and I never asked her for anything, let alone suggested she change her will." "That's your story," Derek sneered. "Mine will sound quite different in court. The devoted nephew, cruelly disinherited in favor of an outsider who married into the family for money. Is that what you're planning? To challenge the will?" "My lawyer filed the paperwork yesterday." His smug expression reminded me so much of Evelyn at her worst that I nearly laughed at the irony. "You should prepare yourself, Rachel. Family disputes like this get ugly. Every detail of your relationship with Aunt Evelyn will be examined. Every moment of your marriage to Daniel will be scrutinized." The threat hung in the air between us. I thought of the Christmas dinner where Evelyn had humiliated me, of the countless slights I had endured from both her and Derek over the years. I thought of the folder in Richard's office, Evelyn's meticulous notes documenting everyone's behavior, including Derek's transparent attempts to secure his inheritance. "I'm not afraid of scrutiny," I said quietly. "Are you?" His confidence faltered slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means Evelyn kept records, Derek. Detailed notes about everyone's behavior. including yours. I maintained steady eye contact. Every time you canceled plans with her when a better invitation came along, every backhanded compliment, every not-so-subtle hint about what you'd do with her money once she was gone. Color drained from his face. You're bluffing. Richard has the records. You're welcome to ask him yourself. I moved toward the front door, opening it, in a clear invitation for him to leave. Contest the will if you want to, Derek, but be prepared for the truth to come out. All of it. He stalked toward the door, pausing as he passed me. This isn't over. That money has been in the Hartman family for generations. It doesn't belong to some nurse from Ohio who got lucky. After he left, I leaned against the closed door, my heart racing despite my outward composure. The confrontation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. For years, I had absorbed the Hartmans' contempt without fighting back. Standing my ground felt foreign, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Derek told me what happened. We need to talk. Meet me for dinner tonight? I stared at the message, weighing my response. We hadn't spoken since his angry departure from our apartment a week ago. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to continue establishing my independence. But another part recognized that we couldn't move forward, together or apart, without honest conversation. Trattoria Giancarlo at 7, I replied. The small Italian restaurant had been our favorite when we first started dating, before Evelyn's influence had pulled us into the orbit of more exclusive establishments. That evening, I arrived at the restaurant to find Daniel already seated, looking uncomfortably out of place among the checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in Chianti bottles. He stood when he saw me, his smile tentative. You look different, he said as I sat down. I had exchanged my usual conservative attire for a dress I loved but had rarely worn, too bright, too bold for Evelyn's approval. I feel different, I admitted. We ordered wine, navigating the awkward small talk until our glasses arrived. Then Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. I owe you an apology, he said, the words clearly practiced but nonetheless sincere. I've had time to think about what you said, about me not standing up for you with Mom. You were right. I took a sip of wine, watching him over the rim of my glass. Thank you for saying that. I was afraid of her, he continued, his voice low. My whole life, I was afraid of disappointing her, of losing her approval. I didn't realize how much I was losing in the process. The admission surprised me. In 6 years of marriage, Daniel had never acknowledged his mother's control over him, let alone his fear of her. Derek's contesting the will, he said, changing the subject abruptly. He wants me to join the lawsuit. And will you? I asked, bracing myself for his answer. Daniel shook his head. No. Whatever Mom's reasons, it was her decision to make. Fighting it would just drag us all through more pain. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching mine. I'd rather focus on repairing what's broken between us. The sincerity in his voice gave me pause. Was this the real Daniel emerging from his mother's shadow? Or was it just another Hartman attempting to secure what they wanted through manipulation? What exactly are you proposing? I asked carefully. A fresh start, he said. We move into the Hartford house together, but on equal footing. No more. Letting my family dictate our lives. No more silence when someone mistreats you. His eyes held mine. I want to be the husband you deserved all along. The words were everything I had wanted to hear for years. Yet now, with the freedom to chart my own course, I wasn't sure if our marriage could or should be salvaged. I need more time, I said gently. This isn't just about your mother's money or the house. It's about whether we still have a foundation to build on. Disappointment flickered across his face, quickly masked. I understand, he said, though his tightened jaw suggested otherwise. Just don't make any permanent decisions yet, please. We finished dinner with careful conversation, skirting the deeper issues that remained unresolved between us. As we parted outside the restaurant, Daniel kissed my cheek, a gesture that once would have seemed natural, but now felt like the action of a stranger. 3 weeks after Evelyn's funeral, I stood in the newly renovated kitchen of the Hartford house, my house, preparing for a meeting I had been anticipating, with equal parts determination and anxiety. The space bore little resemblance to the formal, cold room where Evelyn had criticized my cooking. Sunlight streamed through new windows, warming the butcher block countertops and gleaming off stainless steel appliances that I had selected for function rather than status. The doorbell chimed, and I wiped my hands on a dish towel before going to answer it. Dr. Lillian Chen waited on the porch, her practical blazer and sensible shoes a stark contrast to the pearls and heels. Evelyn's social circle favored. "Rachel," she greeted me warmly. "The house looks wonderful already. So much light." I ushered her in, leading her to the sunroom I had converted into a meeting space. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the garden, where autumn had painted the trees in fiery oranges and reds. "Thank you for coming," I said, pouring coffee into mugs that would have horrified Evelyn, with their bright colors and mismatched patterns. "Your guidance means everything for this project." Dr. Chen, Lily, as she preferred, was the director of Hartford Community Health Clinic, where I had volunteered as a nurse before my marriage. The clinic provided critical care to underserved communities, operating on a shoestring budget that limited how many people they could help. "Your proposal is ambitious," Lily remarked, spreading papers across the table between us. "An entire wing dedicated to senior care, mobile health units, extended hours. The funding required is substantial. $2 million, I confirmed. "That's the amount I've allocated from Evelyn's estate. Enough to sustain these expansions for at least 5 years with careful management." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "That's extremely generous, Rachel. But may I ask why? Senior care, specifically?" I gazed out at the garden, gathering my thoughts. Evelyn spent her final years isolated by her own bitterness. She had money for the best care, but what she lacked was community. People who saw her as more than just her wealth or status. I turned back to Lily. "I want to create something that might have helped her, and that will definitely help others like her." "Creating meaning from a difficult relationship," Lily observed. "That's quite remarkable." "It's not entirely altruistic," I admitted. "Working on this gives me purpose, direction." Lily nodded, understanding in her eyes. We had been close before my marriage, before I had gradually withdrawn under the pressure of fitting into Evelyn's world. She knew parts of my story that even Daniel didn't. "And how is Daniel handling all of this?" she asked, the question gentle but direct. "We're in limbo," I replied honestly, "living separately while I figure out what I want." "And what do you want, Rachel?" The question hung in the air, simple yet profoundly difficult to answer. What did I want now that I had the freedom to choose? For so long, my energy had been focused on surviving Evelyn's disapproval, on trying to secure a place in a family that viewed me as an outsider. Now that I had inherited not just Evelyn's wealth but her position of power, the possibilities were dizzying. "I want to make a difference," I said finally. "I want to use this inheritance in ways that matter, and I want to reclaim parts of myself that got lost along the way." Lily smiled. "Then let's make that happen, starting with this project." For the next 2 hours, we refined the proposal for what would become the Evelyn Hartman Senior Care Initiative. The irony of naming it after her wasn't lost on me, but it felt right, transforming her legacy into something healing rather than hurtful. As Lily was leaving, she paused at the door. "You know, Rachel, I remember when you first came to volunteer at the clinic. You were passionate, confident, you knew exactly who you were. I've missed that, Rachel." Her words stayed with me as I moved through the rest of my day. Had I really changed so much? Had my attempts to fit into Evelyn's world diminished me in ways I hadn't fully recognized? That evening, as I sat in what had been Evelyn's study, now, my study, with the dark paneling painted a soft blue and the imposing desk replaced with something more welcoming, my phone rang. Richard Sterling's name flashed on the screen. "Rachel," his voice was measured as always, but with an undertone of satisfaction. "I thought you should know immediately. Derek has withdrawn his challenge to the will." I sank back in my chair, relief washing over me. "What happened?" "I invited him and his attorney to review your mother-in-law's documentation," Richard explained. "The notes she kept were extraordinarily detailed. When Derek realized how damning they were, he decided litigation would do more harm than good to his reputation." "So it's over?" "This particular battle, yes. The estate is uncontested. Legally yours to do with as you see fit." He paused. "Daniel came to see me yesterday." My heart skipped. "About the will?" "Indirectly. He asked about divorce proceedings, specifically how your inheritance would be affected." The word divorce hung in the air, heavy with finality. Despite our strained relationship, despite the space I had needed, hearing that Daniel was exploring the end of our marriage sent a wave of unexpected grief through me. "And what did you tell him?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "That the inheritance is yours alone, protected from division in a divorce by the terms of Evelyn's will." Richard's tone softened slightly. "I thought you should be prepared, should he decide to move forward." After thanking Richard and ending the call, I sat in the growing darkness, watching as lights began to glimmer across Hartford. Was this what Evelyn had intended? For her final act to drive the final wedge between Daniel and me? No, I decided. This wasn't about Evelyn anymore. This was about choices. Daniel's and mine. For 6 years, I had tried to earn my place in a family that saw me as an interloper. Now, ironically, I held the keys to everything they had valued, while the relationships themselves lay in ruins. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "We need to talk. Can I come over tomorrow evening?" I stared at the message, knowing what was likely coming. "Yes," I replied simply. 7 p.m. The following evening, I prepared for Daniel's visit with a strange calmness. I set out wine and a simple dinner in the garden room, where the last rays of autumn sunshine filtered through changing leaves. This conversation deserved dignity, regardless of its outcome. Daniel arrived punctually, his appearance as carefully put together as always. He hesitated at the threshold of the garden room, taking in the changes I had made to what had once been his mother's sacred space. "You've transformed it," he said, his tone unreadable. "It's warmer." "That was the goal," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. He remained standing, hands in his pockets. "Rachel, I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about our marriage." "So have I said quietly. "I spoke with Richard," he continued, "about legal options." "I know." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "He told you?" "He represents the estate now," I reminded him gently. "He felt I should be informed of any potential legal actions concerning it." Daniel nodded stiffly, then finally sat down across from me. "I'm not proud of that conversation," he admitted. "I was angry, feeling betrayed, not just by Mom's decision, but by how quickly you seemed to move on without me." I poured wine for both of us, giving myself time to choose my words carefully. "I needed space to figure out who I am outside of your mother's shadow, outside of being Mrs. Daniel Hartman." "And who is that person?" he asked, a genuine curiosity in his voice that I hadn't heard in years. "Someone who wants to make a difference," I answered. "Someone who values honesty and courage. Someone who's learning to trust her own judgment again." I met his gaze directly. "Someone who deserves a partner who sees and values her for exactly who she is." Daniel flinched slightly, his fingers tightening around his wine glass. "I want to be that partner, Rachel. I know I've failed you in the past, but people can change." "Can they?" I asked softly. "Or do circumstances change and people simply adapt to protect their interests?" His face flushed. "That's not fair. My feelings for you aren't about the money." "Aren't they?" I leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, Daniel, if your mother had left everything to Derek, would you be sitting here right now, talking about saving our marriage? Or would you be figuring out how to secure your position with him?" The question hung between us, uncomfortable in its directness. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, the truth evident in his hesitation. "That's what I thought," I said, not unkindly. "It's more complicated than that," he protested weakly. "It always is," I acknowledged. "But here's what I've realized, Daniel. I don't want to be someone's convenient choice. I want to be someone's deliberate one." The divorce was finalized on a snowy January morning, 6 months after Evelyn's funeral. I signed the papers in Richard's office, the process surprisingly anticlimactic given the emotional turbulence that had preceded it. Daniel hadn't contested any terms, hadn't asked for alimony or a share of the inheritance. In the end, he had shown more dignity than I had expected. "Are you all right?" Richard asked as I gathered my things to leave. I considered the question seriously. Was I all right? The last half year had been a whirlwind of change. The inheritance, the renovation of the Hartford's house, the launch of the senior care initiative, and now, the official end of my marriage. "I'm better than all right," I answered truthfully. "I'm finding my way." As I stepped out onto the snow-covered sidewalk, the winter air sharp in my lungs, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not happy exactly. There was grief in the ending of something that had once held such promise, but free in a way that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Board approved the expansion unanimously. "We're official. Celebration dinner tonight?" I smiled, typing back a quick acceptance. The senior care initiative had evolved beyond my initial vision, growing into a comprehensive program that would serve hundreds of elderly residents who lacked access to quality health care. The first mobile unit would launch next month, bringing services directly to those who couldn't easily reach the clinic. As I walked to my car, I noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. Derek, watching me from beside his expensive German sedan. Our eyes met briefly before he nodded, not friendly, but acknowledging something between respect and resignation, then got into his car and drove away. That evening, Lily and I celebrated at a small bistro downtown, raising glasses to the project that had consumed so much of my energy over the past months. To the Evelyn Hartman Senior Care Initiative, Lily toasted. May it heal many lives. And to new beginnings, I added, clinking my glass against hers. After dinner, as we walked back to our cars, Lily linked her arm through mine. I have something to ask you, she said. The clinic needs another full-time nurse for the senior program, someone who understands both the medical aspects and the emotional ones. She gave me a meaningful look. Someone like you. I stopped walking. Me? Go back to nursing? You're a gifted nurse, Rachel. Your empathy, your patience, those qualities are rare. She squeezed my arm gently. The inheritance gives you financial freedom, but purpose gives life meaning. Think about it? I promised I would, and as I drove home through the quiet streets of Hartford, her proposition resonated within me. For 6 years, I had set aside my career to fit into Evelyn's expectations of what a Hartman wife should be. The idea of reclaiming that part of my identity felt like coming full circle. The Hartford house was peaceful in the evening light, no longer the intimidating fortress it had once seemed. I had made it my own, not by erasing Evelyn entirely, but by balancing remembrance with renewal. Her portrait still hung in the entry hall, but now it was surrounded by colorful artwork from local artists. Her antique furniture remained in the formal living room, but now shared space with comfortable, welcoming pieces where friends could actually relax. As I settled in the library with a cup of tea, my gaze fell on Evelyn's letter, framed and placed on the desk where I could see it daily. The hardest people to love are the ones who need love the most. Those words had haunted me, challenging me to see beyond my own hurt to something deeper. Had Evelyn truly changed in her final days? Had she recognized the damage her cruelty had caused? Or was her final act simply another manipulation, designed to create chaos even after she was gone? I would never know for certain, but I had chosen to believe the former. That somewhere beneath her harsh exterior, Evelyn had recognized something valuable in the way I had treated her despite everything. That recognition didn't erase the pain she had caused, but it offered a different lens through which to view our troubled relationship. My phone rang, interrupting my reflections. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was from Ohio, my hometown. Hello? I answered cautiously. Rachel Monroe? A male voice asked. This is Dr. James Patterson from Riverside Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your father. My heart stuttered. My father? What's happened? He's had a heart attack, Dr. Patterson explained gently. He's stable now, but it was serious. Your mother asked me to call you. The world seemed to tilt. My father, my kind, steady, quietly supportive father, had always been the picture of health. The thought of him lying in a hospital bed, vulnerable, sent a wave of fear through me. I'll be there as soon as possible, I told the doctor, already mentally planning the fastest route to Ohio. Within an hour, I had booked a flight for the following morning, packed a small suitcase, and called Lily to explain my sudden absence. As I moved through these necessary tasks, a realization settled over me. For all the changes in my life, for all the wealth and freedom I now possessed, what mattered most hadn't changed at all. My family, my real family, needed me, and I would go to them without hesitation. The contrast with the Hartman family dynamics couldn't have been more stark. While Evelyn had used her health crises as tests, keeping score of who showed proper attention, my parents had always been reluctant to burden me with their problems. That my mother had asked the doctor to call me indicated just how serious this situation truly was. As I finally climbed into bed, exhaustion washing over me, I thought about the twists my life had taken since Evelyn's funeral. I had lost a husband but reclaimed myself. I had gained wealth but chosen to use it for something beyond personal comfort. And now, as I prepared to return to my roots, I realized that Evelyn's final lesson wasn't about money or power or status. It was about authenticity. For years, I had tried to become someone I wasn't to earn approval from a woman incapable of giving it freely. Now, ironically, that woman had given me the means to become fully myself again. Tomorrow, I would board a plane to Ohio, to the modest suburban home where my parents had raised me with uncomplicated love and support. I would sit by my father's hospital bed, hold my mother's hand, and be simply Rachel, Not Mrs. Daniel Hartman, not the unexpected heiress to the Hartman fortune, but the daughter who had never had to earn her place in their hearts. And in that homecoming, I would find another piece of myself that had been waiting to be reclaimed. The small hospital room in Ohio was a world away from the imposing grandeur of the Hartford estate. Here, there were no pretenses, no carefully calibrated displays of status, just the steady beep of monitors, the antiseptic smell of medical care, and my father's pale face against white pillows. "Rachie," he smiled when he saw me, using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in years. "You didn't need to come all this way." "Of course I did," I said, kissing his forehead before setting my bag down. "How are you feeling?" "Like an idiot who ignored chest pain for 3 days," he admitted ruefully. "Your mother's already read me the riot act." My mother, Ellen, entered the room carrying 3 paper cups of coffee. Her face, so like mine, just with 25 more years of laugh lines, brightened when she saw me. "Rachel, you made good time." She handed me a cup, then sat beside my father's bed, her hand automatically finding his. "The doctor says he's stable, but they want to do a bypass tomorrow." "Heart surgery?" I asked, medical training immediately kicking in. "Dad, how long has this been going on?" He shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. "The chest pain started a few months ago. I thought it was just acid reflux." "He wouldn't see a doctor," my mother added, the worry of recent days evident in the shadows under her eyes. Men and their stubborn pride. I pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed, slipping easily into the nurse role I had set aside for too long. "Tell me everything the doctors have said so far." Over the next hour, I got a complete picture of my father's condition. 3 blocked coronary arteries requiring bypass surgery, AAI procedure scheduled for the following morning. The prognosis was good with proper intervention and lifestyle changes, but recovery would be lengthy. 6 to 8 weeks before you can go back to teaching, I explained, watching my father's expression fall. "The middle of the semester?" he sighed. "My students will manage," my mother finished firmly. "For once, David, you need to put yourself first." I studied my parents in that moment. Their easy intimacy, the way they communicated in half sentences and knowing glances. After 38 years of marriage, they still reached for each other instinctively in moments of crisis. It was so different from what Daniel and I had shared, so different from the cold calculation that had defined the Hartman family dynamics. That evening, after ensuring my father was comfortable for the night, I drove my mother home to the modest 2-story house where I had grown up. Walking through the front door was like stepping back in time. The same comfortable furniture, slightly more worn, the same family photos lining the hallway, now including my college graduation and wedding day. The same lingering scent of my mother's signature apple cinnamon. Potpourri. "I made up your old room," my mother said, setting her purse on the counter. "Though I warn you, it's become half craft room since you left." "It's perfect," I assured her. As she moved around the kitchen preparing a simple dinner, I took in the familiar surroundings with new eyes. This home had never been showcased in architectural magazines or admired for its pedigree, but it was warm, lived in, genuinely welcoming. Everything the Hartford house had never been under Evelyn's reign. "Mom," I said softly, "I need to tell you something." Over chicken soup and crusty bread, I explained everything that had happened since Evelyn's funeral. The inheritance, the divorce, the senior care initiative. My mother listened without interrupting, her expressive face registering surprise, concern, and eventually understanding. "So that's why you've been so hard to reach these past few months," she said when I finished. "We thought you and Daniel were just busy with, well, with whatever it is you Hartford people do." Her attempt at humor couldn't quite mask her hurt. "I'm sorry," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I should have told you sooner. It's been overwhelming." $8 million, she marveled, shaking her head. "I can't even imagine. And that woman left it all to you? Ironic, isn't it? She spent years making me feel I wasn't good enough, and then..." I trailed off, still not entirely sure how to explain Evelyn's final decision. "Maybe she saw something in you that threatened her," my mother suggested thoughtfully. "Your kindness, your authenticity, qualities she might have lost along the way." I considered this perspective, so different from the narrative of tests and manipulation that had colored my understanding of Evelyn's actions. I never thought of it that way. "People who lash out the most are often fighting their own demons," my mother said, her wisdom born of decades as a high school counselor. "Not that it excuses her behavior," she added quickly. but it might explain it. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom surrounded by the faded posters and book collection of my youth, I reflected on how completely my life had changed in 6 months. I had lost a husband and a mother-in-law but gained independence and purpose. I had inherited wealth beyond anything I had imagined, yet found myself drawn back to the work and the values I had been raised with. The irony wasn't lost on me. Evelyn, who had spent years trying to mold me into her ideal of a Hartman wife, had ultimately given me the means to become more authentically myself than I had been in years. My father's surgery the next morning went smoothly, but it highlighted the challenge ahead. His recovery would require consistent care and support, something my mother couldn't manage alone while continuing her full-time counseling position at the high school. "I'll stay," I said decisively on the 3rd day, as we watched my father take his first cautious steps down the hospital corridor with a physical therapist. "At least until he's more independent." "Rachel, no," my mother protested. "You have your own life, your project in Hartford, which has an excellent director who can manage without me for a while," I countered. "Mom, I'm a nurse. This is literally what I'm trained to do." The relief in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. That evening, I called Lily to explain my extended absence. "Family comes first," she agreed immediately. "The initiative is in good hands. Take all the time you need." The weeks, that followed settled into a rhythm of care and quiet conversations. I helped my father with his exercises, managed his medications, prepared heart-healthy meals, and drove him to follow-up appointments. In between these practical tasks, we talked, really talked, in a way we hadn't since I moved away. "I never understood why you stayed with him," my father admitted one afternoon as we slowly walked. "The neighborhood loop his cardiologist had approved. Daniel, I mean. After the way his family treated you." The question caught me off guard. My parents had never directly criticized Daniel or the Hartmans, maintaining a polite distance that I now recognized as respect for my choices. Even when they disagreed, I thought I could earn their respect, I said after a long moment. "Especially Evelyn's. I thought if I was patient enough, kind enough, eventually they'd accept me." My father stopped walking, his breath slightly labored from the exertion. "Rachel, you never needed to earn what should have been freely given. Love isn't a prize for good behavior, it's a gift." His words struck me with unexpected force. How much of my adult life had been spent trying to prove my worth to people who were incapable of seeing it? How much energy had I wasted trying to earn what, as my father said, should have been freely given? "I know that now," I replied softly. "I'm learning it again." By the time the first spring flowers appeared in my mother's garden, my father had progressed to the point where he could manage most daily activities independently. The time had come for me to return to Hartford, to the life and responsibilities waiting there. The night before my departure, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, my mother brought up a subject we had carefully avoided. "What will you do now, Rachel? With your life, I mean." I considered the question, watching a pair of cardinals flit between trees. "I'm going back to nursing, at the clinic, with the senior care program. It feels right, using my training again." "And the house? Evelyn's house?" "My house now," I corrected gently. "I'm keeping it, but not for the reasons the Hartmans valued it. Not as a status symbol or a family legacy, but as a home. A place where people feel welcomed, not judged." My mother nodded, understanding in her eyes. "And Daniel? Derek? The rest of that family?" "Daniel's moved to Boston. A fresh start," he said. "Derek still lives in Hartford, but we avoid each other by mutual agreement." I smiled wryly. "The rest of the family seems content to pretend I don't exist, as long as I don't cause scandals with the Hartman name." "And are you happy, sweetheart?" The simple question deserved an honest answer. Was I happy? Not in the uncomplicated way I might have been if my life had taken a different path, but I was something perhaps more valuable. I was authentic, purposeful, at peace with both my past and my future. "I'm becoming myself again," I said finally. And yes, there's happiness in that. 1 year to the day after Evelyn's funeral, I stood in the garden of the Hartford house, my house, surrounded by people who had become my chosen family. Lily was there with her husband and children, along with the core team from the Senior Care Initiative. My parents had made the trip from Ohio, my father now fully recovered and back to teaching, though with a lightened schedule and a new appreciation for what truly mattered in life. The garden, once a formal showpiece maintained for appearances rather than enjoyment, had been transformed. Where there had once been rigid hedges and mathematically precise flower beds, There were now winding paths, comfortable benches, and an abundance of native plants that attracted butterflies and birds. In the center stood a small gazebo, painted white and surrounded by roses, Evelyn's favorite flower, now thriving in a setting that invited people to linger rather than merely admire from a distance. "It's beautiful, Rachel," my mother said, linking her arm through mine as we walked the paths. "Nothing like I imagined from your descriptions of the old garden." "Evelyn would probably be horrified," I admitted with a small smile. She believed gardens should be structured, controlled, like everything else in her life. "And yet she chose you as her heir," my mother observed. "Someone who sees beauty in a different kind of order." The thought had occurred to me as well. Had Evelyn, in her final days, recognized something valuable in my different perspective? Had she perhaps wanted her legacy transformed in ways she hadn't been brave enough to attempt herself? The gathering was more than just a social occasion. Today marked the official dedication of the Evelyn Hartman Senior Care Center, a converted wing of the A.T. Hartford House that now served as the administrative headquarters for the initiative that had grown beyond my initial vision. What had begun as mobile health units and extended clinic hours had evolved into a comprehensive program that included medical care, social activities, transportation services, and even a small residential facility for seniors who needed additional support, but not full nursing home care. As Director of Nursing Services, I divided my time between administrative duties and hands-on care, finding fulfillment in both roles. The inheritance had given me the means to create something meaningful, but it was my training and experience, the very career Evelyn had disparaged as nursing strangers for scraps, that gave me the knowledge to make it successful. After lunch on the terrace, Lily called for everyone's attention, raising her glass in my direction. "A year ago today, we lost someone whose legacy has become something none of us could have predicted," she began, her eyes meeting mine with warm understanding. "The Evelyn Hartman Senior Care Initiative has already served over 500 seniors in our community, providing not just medical care but dignity, companionship, and hope." Murmurs of approval rippled through the gathering as Lily continued. "Today we officially dedicate this beautiful space as our permanent headquarters. But more importantly, we celebrate the vision and compassion of the woman who made it all possible. Not Evelyn Hartman, but Rachel Monroe." The applause caught me off guard, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. My father squeezed my shoulder supportively as I stepped forward to say a few words. "Thank you all for being here," I began, looking around at the faces of those who had supported me through this transformative year. "When I inherited this house, many people assumed I would simply enjoy the wealth and status it represented. But I wanted something different. I wanted to create meaning from what had often been a painful relationship." I paused, gathering my thoughts. Evelyn Hartman was a complex woman who valued order, tradition, and appearances above all. In naming this initiative after her, I'm not whitewashing our difficult history or pretending she was something she wasn't. Instead, I'm acknowledging that even the most difficult relationships can yield unexpected gifts if we're willing to transform pain into purpose. As the formal part of the gathering concluded and people broke into smaller conversational groups, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the garden, Daniel, watching the proceedings from a respectful distance. We hadn't spoken since he moved to Boston 6 months ago, though Richard had kept me informed of his new position at a financial firm there. I made my way across the lawn, curious rather than anxious about this unexpected appearance. "Daniel," I greeted him, stopping a few feet away. "I didn't expect to see you today." He looked good, more relaxed than I remembered, his expression open rather than guarded. "I hope it's okay that I came. I saw the announcement in the Hartford Courier about the dedication." He gestured toward the house. "What you've done here is remarkable, Rachel." "Thank you," I said, genuinely appreciating the acknowledgement. "How's Boston?" "Different. Good different." He hesitated, then added, "I'm seeing someone. Her name is Claire. She's an art teacher at a public school." I smiled, noting the significance of his choice. Someone as far from the Hartman ideal as possible. Someone who would have horrified Evelyn with her ordinary career and lack of social connections. "I'm happy for you, Daniel. Truly." He nodded, his gaze drifting over the transformed garden. "You know, my entire life, I was trying to be what my mother wanted, the perfect Hartman heir. It wasn't until I lost everything that I realized how trapped I'd been. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. How Evelyn's final act had freed us both, in entirely different ways." "Are you happy?" I asked, echoing my mother's question to me months earlier. Daniel considered this, his expression thoughtful. I'm learning to define happiness for myself, rather than by my mother's standards. He met my eyes directly. Are you? I looked back at the gathering, my parents chatting with Lily, the team from the initiative playing with Lily's children on the lawn, the seniors from our residential facility enjoying the garden paths with their caregivers. Yes, I said simply. I am. As Daniel prepared to leave, he reached into his pocket and handed me a small box. I found this when I was clearing out my apartment in Hartford. I thought you should have it. Inside was a vintage silver locket that I recognized immediately. Evelyn's, one she had worn frequently, but that had disappeared shortly before her death. Open it, Daniel suggested. I did, and what I found inside took my breath away. A tiny photograph of me, smiling, cut from a family Christmas card from years earlier. I don't understand, I whispered. Neither did I when I found it, Daniel admitted, but maybe part of her saw in you what the rest of us missed. After Daniel left, I wandered through the garden alone, the locket cool against my palm. Had Evelyn, beneath her cutting remarks and cold demeanor, secretly recognized something in me that she respected? Had she perhaps worn my image close to her heart even while keeping me at arm's length? I would never know for certain. But as I slipped the locket around my neck, I chose to believe the more generous interpretation, that even the hardest heart could harbor unexpected affection, that even the most difficult relationship could contain moments of unspoken connection. The sun was beginning to set as the gathering wound down, casting long shadows across the transformed garden. My parents would stay for a few more days, occupying the guest suite I had created specifically with their comfort in mind. Tomorrow, the Senior Care Center would officially open its doors, beginning the next chapter of its evolution. Standing in the gazebo as twilight descended, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I had stood trembling at a podium, delivering a eulogy of kind fiction for a woman who had shown me little kindness. I had done it out of some deep-rooted belief that everyone deserved dignity in death, even those who had denied it to others in life. That act of grace, unearned, freely given, had changed everything. Not because of the inheritance it had unexpectedly secured, but because of what it had revealed about my own character. In that moment of choosing compassion over resentment, I had unwittingly demonstrated the very quality that would guide my path forward. The locket rested against my collarbone, a tangible reminder of the complexity of human relationships, how cruelty and connection could exist side by side, how understanding often came too late, how the most important legacy wasn't money or property, but the values that shaped how we used them. As darkness fell and lights began to twinkle along the garden paths, warm, welcoming lights, so different from the cold illumination Evelyn had preferred, I made my way back to the house. Not Evelyn's house anymore, not the Hartman estate, but my home, a place transformed by the same quiet grace that had somehow transformed me. Inside the entry hall, Evelyn's portrait still hung, her stern gaze watching over a house she would barely recognize. Beneath it, I had placed a small plaque with words that had become my guiding principle, words drawn from her letter, but reshaped into something universal. The measure of our character lies not in how we treat those who love us, but in how we treat those who give us nothing in return. Even the hardest hearts can be transformed when met with compassion.